Hi, my name is Lorraine Watry and welcome to my studio. I am a watercolor artist and I've worked with watercolor for 26 years now, and I thought I would start a new series of videos where I go over different tips, tricks, and techniques for working with watercolor. And hopefully these short videos will help you in your journey, and if you have a question or a technique that you would like to see, please comment below and I will try to accommodate that in a future video. Hi again. Today's video is going to be talking about how to paint glass. And I am going to use marbles. As you can see, I have an image of some marbles here as a way to talk about glass. So glass can come in a variety of surfaces where you might have crystal that has lots of grooves and surfaces for there to be reflections and color and light bouncing off of it, and then you might have something that's smoother like a marble, and it does get reflections and has some variation to it, but it may not have the same look to it as maybe a glass jar that may have water in it that causes refractions and reflections to happen. So there's a variety of glass, but in general, when you are painting glass, for me at least, because I'm painting it very realistically, I want to note all those changes of color and value and look for things that are reflecting into the glass. So I thought I would do the drawing sort of on camera today so that you can sort of see what I'm looking for, and I'll talk about it a little bit as I'm going. So I will not be painting all of these today, but I want to give you some information and show you a little bit of how I do it, and then at the end of the video I will have some of the paintings I've done of marbles that you can look at a little closer if you would like to. And also I am going to be doing an online painting glass with watercolor class that will come up starting in November. It will be 3 sessions of 2 hours each, and I will provide the image, and all of the information is available on my website. So if you want to go look at that class, it is painting glass in watercolor, and yeah, it will be more involved than what I will be showing you today. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to start noting where the big shapes of color or value changes are. And I must have had 2 lamps on when I was taking these pictures, because there are some highlights from those lights on the marbles. And I like to have those on there because having that bright white value change on a glass surface can really make it look shiny. So I'm going to put both of those on. And I don't draw very darkly because I don't want the pencil line to show up in my final painting. So I'm not going to be making this very dark. Hopefully you can kind of see where I'm working, and it'll make more sense when I start painting it. And I use a mechanical pencil to draw with, and a 5B or 5 millimeter, not 5B, 5 millimeter lead. There is a dark shape at the top of the marble, so I'm going to put that on there. And then right here, this round or oval-ish looking shape is actually a reflection of this marble. And so I noted that on there. It doesn't have a lot of yellow in it though. It is mostly blue, and then there may be just a little bit of yellow tint to that area. So this blue marble is really has most of the color in that area. It's not reflecting the color of the marble. This one actually is not really that bright either. It's more neutral. So I'm coming around, and then there's a lighter shape right in through here on the marble. So all of those things I will note. Whenever I'm doing a shape that sort of has a soft edge to it, I usually, and that's what I kind of did here, I usually will make that shape with kind of a skipped line so that I remember that I want to make that edge softer edged. Different artists will do it different ways, and to note to themselves that that is a change in the edge of the line. Okay. And then there is a little bit of a darker shape in there and a lighter edge right here. Sometimes with glass you will get bounce back light. So there's a lighter edge right here compared to the shape that's right next to it. And this little strip of lighter color right in here may be because the light is reflecting off of the white. This is actually on a towel, and the light reflected off of that and then it caused a little bit of a lighter area on the marble right there because it bounced the light back. Now the other thing that I will look for and include are little tiny possible highlights. These are actually not really light highlights, but they're probably something that I'll go ahead and mask so that I don't have to remember to paint around them and keep them lighter. And then where this marble was reflecting onto the blue one, it has a little bit of some different shapes in the marble. Oops, and there's a highlight right at the top. I was putting that highlight too low. So that highlight that's right there, I will definitely put some masking fluid on. And there's a lighter edge on this marble that is bright white, or very pale blue if it's not white. Yeah, it's probably pale blue because if I squint at it, it's not as vibrant as this area. So that little shape right there is probably because it's catching light from the white surface and it's creating that light edge. And so all of those different things are what I am looking for, because that way I can give it some reflective qualities and it will feel like it's reflecting the area around it because it's shiny. So I will go ahead and put the mask on, and I'll speed that section up, but you can watch it if you would like, and then I'll be back in a few seconds. Okay, so I have the mask on there. It is dry. I gave it a few minutes to dry, and I just wanted to give you a word of caution when you are going to maybe paint something that's round. If you are working from your image and you want to trace your image, I would suggest for marbles that you actually find something that you can use to create that shape that is already round, because there was a demonstration that I was doing and I quickly went to trace my my photo so that I'd have it ready, and I realized after tracing it that either the angle I was taking it with my camera or the actual marble were not very round. So some of the older marbles especially may not be very round, and if you go to paint it and you've already traced it and then you put it on your paper, you may realize once it's drawn on your paper that it's not round. So I just used a ramekin that I keep for painting or using for my watercolors. For the big one, I found a lid from a container that fit pretty well that marble right there, and so I used that one. And then I have a let's see, a circle template that you can pick up at a lot of either art stores or craft stores, and I found one that was pretty close in size to the back marble, and I just used that for the smallest marble there. And so that's just a cautionary note on when you're doing a round object, just to be careful that you actually make it look round. And I am going to pull out some cobalt. I may end up using some ultramarine on this marble as well, but for the first pass of color I'm going to use cobalt. And I'm trying to decide. I'm thinking I may put on that lightest value first, and then start at the top and work back that way. And generally I start from the top of a shape and work down, but because that lighter strip is down at the bottom, this marble does have, it's not got the harder edges of the more opaque marble. The red on that marble at the back is a harder edge, where the shapes and color changes here are softer edged. And so I'm going to, we'll see if this works. My shape down here may be drying a little bit before I get down there, but we will see. All right, so I have made ultramarine, cobalt and the Quin Rose. I've made sort of a purpley blue, and I am going to ignore the reflection of the of this marble in here for now, and I'm going to start with my lighter blue value, and then it does get a little more neutral as it comes this way, so I might get a touch of yellow in it, and that will neutralize that purple, because it's a complementary color, and also it's reflecting that color into, I'm going to mix it just a touch on the palette first before I go back in here. Sorry, I was trying to think and paint at the same time. Okay, so I have that in there, and then I'm going to come over here and paint on this lighter shape right here. And so when I am looking at glass, I am not thinking, oh, this is a marble and I have to paint, or a cup or a vase or whatever I'm painting, that I have to paint the outside edges. I am purely looking at the value and color changes, and I'm painting those shapes. And so eventually it will all fill in to create a marble or a whatever the glass piece is. But to start, I'm just painting shapes. And that's the way I also think about anything I'm painting, is I'm painting the shape and I'm looking for value and color changes. So right here around that highlight, there's a lighter bit as well, and it's pretty similar to the shape I just made. All right, so I will let this dry and I'll be right back. You may have noticed that the look of the video has changed, because I have now set up to teach some online classes, and the first one starts this coming week, and then I have another online class for watercolor painting glass, actually, that will start November 17th. And that class actually still has room if anyone is interested. It is an intermediate to advanced type of class, so you do need to have a little bit of experience with watercolor in order to feel comfortable at the level that I will teach it. So I am going to continue working on the marble, and I have started with the lightest color that's on the marble, and I'm not going to be painting all three of the marbles. I'm just going to do the larger marble. So I'm going to pull out my cobalt again, and painting glass, as I may have said earlier, is finding the shapes within the glass. So I'm looking for value changes, I'm looking for color changes, and I am not thinking about that I have to paint the round marble. I'm thinking about, okay, where is this next medium value on that that part of the marble up there. And so I always paint, well, I shouldn't say always, I generally paint my paintings in layers, and because there are some darker areas that are in this area as well that is a lot darker than the cobalt, I'm actually just going to paint the cobalt over that whole upper section. And I did put some mask on the paper, as I explained in the first part of the video, for the highlights. I actually just missed an edge there. I went over just a little far, but that's okay. I can lift that back out later if I need to. And I am painting around the lighter shapes that I put on earlier. And I'm not going to worry about making this perfect, but I'll try to be as careful as I can. And this is a good size. This is about 5 by 7. So if you're trying a subject, or if you're just learning either watercolor in general or just how to do a certain technique, generally a 5 by 7, even 4 by 6, they can be good sizes to try things. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend staying with that size all the time, because I know for me that when I do a very detailed painting, I will I have more room to do those details if I'm painting larger. So it just kind of depends on the subject and what I'm working on, but I vary the size that I paint. I paint all variety, from real small to larger pieces. Okay. So I'm going to pull this around, and because this is basically an all blue marble, I could paint this medium blue in other areas, but what I like to do, what is beneficial for me, is to basically paint the shapes in the color and value that I see, and it just helps me keep track of where I am. So even though some of these lower edges are darker and could have that blue in the mix that I will do later, it just helps me to not add that in just yet. Now I am seeing a little bit of that cobalt down in this area as well, and so I will go ahead and paint that in there. And then later on I can adjust it. It's a little more muted than maybe some of the cobalt that's up above. And I see there's a little bit right on this edge. And maybe a little that comes up into the darker shape with kind of random edges. They actually probably soften into the darker shape, but for now I'm just going to put it on as a hard shape, and I can adjust that later if I want to. I actually feel like that now that I'm looking at it more. And with glass, it can really help to take your time and look carefully at each area. So one of the biggest things that I do, and I think I've mentioned this in a few other videos, is observation. Because I am trying to paint a realistic looking object, those observations of where the color changes or how dark or light something is, the shape of something, are really big beneficial things that I do. So observation can really help when you're painting a realistic object. And that might literally be just taking some time and doing a map of the area. You could trace it out, you could copy your photo, and you could write on here medium blue, kind of purple in that blue. This is more of a black. Just some of those things can really assist. You also could do hard and soft edges. So there is a harder edge here, but then for this shape, as it comes down, that lighter shape right there is a little softer, or it's actually closer in value as well. So right now, my shape right here is it is the same value the whole way around, and it's hard edged the whole way around. So I will need to adjust that in order for it to have a little bit more of a realistic feel. So I am going to dry this with a blow dryer, and then I will come back and add the next layers. So I have the first layers that I did dry, and I'm going to go pull out some, I think I'll actually use my Ultramarine Deep. And ultramarine deep is darker than ultramarine blue, and it's probably, this is a Holbein color, and it may be very similar to French ultramarine. There is a little bit of a difference between French ultramarine and regular ultramarine blue. French ultramarine is just leaning a little closer to the purple side of blue, but I feel like, I think that I have looked, compared ultramarine deep and French ultramarine, and that ultramarine deep is a little darker blue. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out, and I think I'm going to use my burnt umber. I have not pre-checked these colors, but I am going to make a dark, almost black, and normally I might use burnt sienna, but burnt umber is on the cooler side, and so I might want to use that black over the burnt sienna because just the color of black I can get with it. Now, that's not the only black mix I will use, but it is one that I do use every now and then. So, all right. I did have a question recently on painting clear glass, and clear glass is just like painting colored glass, except that you may end up painting more grays and kind of muted purples when you're painting clear glass. The under part of the yellow marble right here is gray, or it's not gray, it's clear, but it's getting, we're seeing reflections and color in that area because of the shadows and the colors around it that are creating color within that that clear part of the marble. All right, so there is a dark edge, and I have to, sorry, I got a little quiet there. When I am concentrating, I will often forget to talk a little loud for the video. And so this part is a darker edge, and it does kind of go along here. I probably should switch brushes. I need to go with just a little bit of a finer edge. And this is the ultramarine deep and the burnt umber that I'm using, as I said. So I made a version of black with that. And then as I want to do this section, I actually want some edges on there to be soft focus. It's not hard edged everywhere on the kind of triangle shape that's right here. So I'm going to place some water up above and below that shape, and that will give space. Whoops, my cobalt is not quite completely dry and I'm lifting it a little. That's okay. I can go back and adjust that if need be. Cobalt also is a color that will lift easily, so even when it's dry, which this mostly is, it doesn't feel real cool to the touch. It can lift a little bit depending on the pressure you're giving it and how much you go back and forth over that area, so it's just something to be aware of. Okay, and then I'm coming down right along this edge, and I may need to go back and add a little more. I'm going to try now to kind of add some more depth to the darkest part of this shape. I'm just touching my brush to that area. It's still damp enough that it will allow me to do that. This little piece right here that moved because of the water that I placed there, I am not going to worry about. I can come back and adjust that later. There also is an edge up here. Now that one, because it doesn't have as much paint sitting in there, I can clean my brush. I'm using a little bit of clear water, and this brush is just barely damp now, and I can kind of go up in here. I actually think, because this cobalt needs a little bit of value on it, I might go back into my cobalt mix now, and I'm going to get more color out, and I'm going to dry the back of my brush so that there's not too much moisture in here, because this area up here is slightly shiny still, which means it's a little damp still. So I'm okay if the edges blur just a little bit, but I don't want a lot of that dark value moving down into the cobalt that's up there. And then as I come down, so not only is this adding value to that main area, the cobalt of the marble, but as I come down, then I can go next to this darker shape that I painted in there, and I can come right up next to those edges. And I actually am going to go back before this dries and add a little bit of dark to that shape. And by doing it this way, not only am I going to have soft focus edges, but there is a little bit of the darker kind of gray right in here that I'm seeing in the marble. So now, because I've wet this area, I can add that gray right now. I'm going to go into my darker mix, and sometimes it's better to do this in stages and let the first area dry and then come back and do this. And I've done enough with wet on wet now and paints or painting watercolor that I feel like I can come in and adjust all of that and it will all work out together. If I were newer to watercolor, it might be better to do what I normally might do and just do it in layers and then come back and add a layer after everything had dried. So let me get this going. But it is all about the moisture level of your pigment. So the paint on my brush right now is pretty dry. It doesn't have a lot of moisture on my palette, and so if I had come back in with very wet paint, then it could have caused a bloom and pushed against that dark color and moved it all. And so because I was working with drier pigment on my palette and my brush was drier, then I was able to control where everything is moving or not moving. Okay, so I have that in. I think that's looking good, and I was able to kind of adjust how the edges were working together, so it did that darker shape did remain as a darker shape with softer edges. It is just a touch lighter right up in here where the light is catching that shape, so I think I'm going to see if I can lift a touch of that back. And then as it comes around to the right, it starts to get a little darker. Okay. That will dry better. Now I can go down and start down here because it's not touching any of the wet area that's up above. And I do have an edge here still that I will need to fix before I do that reflection that's may not be real visible on the video, but right here there's a reflection of this marble, and there's a teeny tiny bit of yellow reflecting, but it's so minimal that I don't know that I'll put very much of it on there. I may do just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to use the Ultramarine Deep and the Burnt Umber to make that dark again. And this area down here is pretty more on the black side than the blue side, so I'm using more of the Burnt Umber in it to make it a little more neutral and not too blue. And whenever I'm doing a marble or a piece of glass, I am generally working it up in stages, and I usually will, unlike some other paintings, I will usually focus on one object for a while. So I may get in all of this marble, all of the color on it before I would move to the next one. Or I may put on the first few layers, and then I might put on some layers for the other shapes or objects in the painting, and then I can go back and forth between the two of them. But at some point, depending on how busy or intricate an object is in glass, at some point it helps to just focus on that one object rather than go back and forth. And I do know some artists that will just work up one object and then move to the next object and not even put the first few layers on those other objects. Now, as I'm coming over this blue down on the bottom, it is more muted. And so what I did was I wet my brush, and then I came over to the palette just to see if I have a little bit of that gray or black on my brush still. And I am going to use that over the cobalt that I put there earlier, so that it will mute this area. And then as I come to the right, I'm going to get a little more of the cobalt in my brush. I did not take out all of the black, but I want it to be just a touch bluer. So I'm coming back over that area and trying to make it round. That's the other thing when you're painting a marble, is trying to keep your edges as neat as you can so that it will remain round looking. And now I'm going to go back into my dark. All of this down here is pretty much soft edged. So then as I come up this way, I'm going to go back into the ultramarine deep. And I need to really stop before I go up there, because that is still damp from what I was doing up here. Now, if I were doing this not in a video and not trying to move with a little bit of speed, I would probably have paused, make sure everything was dry on the upper section, and then I could come do this lower section, just because then I could keep working it over in this area as well. Okay, right here, I'm going to go back into the cobalt just a little bit and re-wet over that area to darken it. And maybe just a touch. All right, so I'm going to dry that, and then I will be back and I'll show you the next few steps. If you have a video suggestion for a tip, trick, or technique that you would like to see with watercolor, please comment below. And if you're interested in taking an online class with me, I will have the one coming up in November and possibly some other classes. So if you sign up for my newsletter on my website, then you will receive notification when I add classes to my list. And I hope you have a good day. See you next time. Bye.